course, we're continuing our special coverage of International Women's Day. Special discussion. We have two panels split into two to discuss the significance of International Women's Day in the business world. We're joined by Rolake Akinkugbe-Filani, Chief Commercial Officer at Mixta Africa, and Adia So, Interim CEO at Thrive Agri. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
I want to ask you guys about normalizing women in power. Little girls and boys are born into a world now where the Director General of the World Trade Organization is Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. I mean, for us adults, it took a long time before we got there, but how do we psychologically normalize women in power? Rolake, if you want to go first.
Well, great feat by Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. She's a first of many, but I think one of the important things about this whole glass ceiling that we talk about is that it has to start from a young age. And I think the key is representation, visible role models. The more Ngozis we see in power, the better it is. We also need to encourage young girls to enter fields that are not typically seen as being for girls. But I think the one important thing I will say is that when a woman does reach the top and she does succeed, it is important to capitalize on that momentum so that she doesn't become the last. And I think we tend to get complacent. And the fact that we have to celebrate it is itself challenging. We need to see more of that. And I think representation and modeling will be key.
Great stuff. Adia, what do you think?
Rolake has done such a great job of talking through it. But I think in everyday life, right, I'm a woman leader, so is Rolake. I think that in our everyday work, people then start to experience the reality of leadership by a woman, right? And see that it's not that different, it's not worse. And in some cases, it's even better, according to some, right? So I think that give women the jobs, allow women to be leaders, because I think there's still a persisting access issue. So I think once women are given that access, you can actually measure us by results and see that we're doing just as well.
Fantastic. I want to take a look at the International Women's Day, the mission list, which is from their website, where they've got a number of things that they're... Okay, so there they are. There's the list. So celebrate tech, women and innovation, applaud equality for women in sport, educate women on health choice decisions, build inclusive workplaces for women, increase visibility of women creatives, forge women empowerment worldwide. Adia, let me only ask you about tech and increasing visibility of women creatives. Is that to your satisfaction in 2021 from where we're coming from in prior years?
Absolutely not. I think there's definitely still a lot more we can do. I think a few women are spotlighted heavily, but I think there are so many more. So one of the things I personally do now is I don't take every opportunity I'm given. I will step back and highlight another woman that I know. I think there's definitely a lot more room for women to be highlighted within tech and in creative spaces. I think the key to doing that, though, is to allow access. I think that there remains an access issue. Once that access is granted, I think it becomes a lot easier for perspectives to change. Fantastic.
Rolake, you're in energy, you're in real estate, infrastructure. Same question to you within that space. Yeah. Is there enough recognition there? Are we celebrating enough? What's your take?
I mean, you put out quite the laundry list, but it's not exhaustive. And I think Adia makes a really good point. One of the things that I'm personally trying to do is actually amplify other women's voices. And I've also learned that it's important for those of us who are in positions of influence to embrace our platforms and embrace visibility, because it sends out a very important message. But I also have to emphasize that we need female leadership today. And women have been more impacted by the global pandemic. There's a McKinsey report that shows that women constitute 54% of global employment, 39% of global employment, but have been more affected, up to the tune of 54% by COVID. So I think it highlights the fact that we have a lot more work to do, both on the side of organizations as well as the women themselves. Women need to lean in, but organizations need to be very intentional and deliberate about the policies that they implement to advance women leadership and including in the workplace.
Great stuff. Go ahead, you want to follow up? Yes.
So I'd like to add to the benefit of creating workspaces that are inclusive of women. I think not every man fits your classic CEO persona. And in workplaces where I have been, the men that do not fit those personas also get left behind. However, when there's more equity between men and women in these workplaces, right, there's equity for everybody. So for the less extroverted, less type A, go, male persona in the office, right, there's more opportunity created when you actually have a more balanced workplace. So inclusivity for women improves inclusivity for everyone.
Great points from you both. Thank you for that. I want to ask you, what is the significance of today? So when we have these days like this, I don't want to bring up Valentine's Day, but people say there's a group that says, you know, this should be celebrated and pushed 365 days a year. And others say, well, yes, we understand that, but today, it needs to be recognized and celebrated. The push-pull between the two. I want to get Rocky, start with you. What's the significance of today for you? What has to happen?
It really irks me when people say, why can't we just celebrate women every day? The point is, women have been, for many, many centuries, fighting and struggling to get their voices heard and for their seat at the table. Now, in a sense, they've created a platform and a day to highlight achievements, but also to signal that there is still significant room to grow. And I think more importantly, the message is that we also need the men as allies. Because the reality is that in many places and corridors of influence, men still hold sway. And it's important to drive change and be a change agent if you don't have influence and power. So this is a way of saying, you know what, let's all unite. As Adia has said, that this is actually equality for women is equality for all. And I think it's important to be celebrated. It's important to highlight achievement and female leadership. Look at some of the women leaders around the world, Jacinda Ardern, Angela Merkel. During the time of COVID, some of the countries that dealt with it successfully were actually women in leadership.
True.
You know, so I think these are moments and times to really take stock and then think about the gap and the progress that's still to be made.
All right, so it should be celebrated definitely today.
Yeah.
Adia, what about you? Today or 365 days it should be?
I think the fact that there is even a debate moves the conversation forward. So for every person that says, well, why do we take one day instead of every day? And how come men aren't celebrated or there's no international, Men's Day? I think I'm grateful that for every conversation that debate even sparks, because it allows both sides to have empathy for each other, right? And to actually move the conversation forward. So I'm not going to pick a side. Let's keep debating.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to ask you both about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and closing the gap. Should we, in order to close the gap, what happens when a little girl wants to go into the arts or entertainment? Do you course? How do we close the gap for STEM when we've got little girls that want to do something else? How do you work that balance out?
The simplest way I can think about it is I'm a musician, and one of the things I'm trying to do...
You play the piano, right? You're right, I remember that.
People say, well, your son is naturally going to become a pianist, isn't he? But I think, what about other instruments? So the easiest way to think about it is just make all the toys available, right? And then he gravitates towards the one. But if there's no opportunity for him, he wouldn't even know what to gravitate towards. So it's not like we're trying to mold women into something that they don't want to be. But it's to say, look, STEM is a viable option for you. It is not a male-dominated or a male-specific field. And I think it also needs to start in the homes. And I think we need to actively sponsor and stake our reputation on girls progressing through the STEM channel. I think those are some of the ideas that I think we should look to implement.
We've got a minute left. Adia, let me give you the last word on the STEM matter. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by training, but I definitely had very strong support in my family. But it's funny how I walk into rooms in Nigeria and internationally, into rooms full of men, and they're confused as to my level of confidence, right? But for me, walking into a room full of grown men was dinner on Tuesday, right? Because this is what I grew up around. So that immense support, from my family, from my extended family, made it more natural for me to step into such fields. So I think rather than coercing women into, let's focus more on not coercing them out of what they are naturally inclined to, and stop asking questions like, are women's brains large enough or capable of absorbing such things? They are, right? That's actually not the issue. Just let them do what comes naturally.
Adia So and Rolake Akinkugbe, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. We'll take it.